Hey guys, welcome back to Code and Box Automation Lab. This is Sharful. In this lecture, we're going to learn what is environment, what is variable, how to create different environment, and also the relation with the environment and variables. Let's go. So first, before we know environment, we'll learn what is variable, because the variable have a correlation with the environment. Okay, so what is variable? So variables enable you to store and reuse values in Postman. By storing a value as a variable, you can reference it through your collections, environment, request, and TypeScript. Variables help you work efficiently, collaborate with teammates. Okay, so that's the very generic definition of a variable. So if you're familiar with the program, the programming world, so you are familiar with already variable. Variable is nothing, it stores some sort of data, and then so it will have a variable name and it will store some sort of data, and then wherever you need that same data, instead of direct hard coding that data, you are going to use the variable name. Here one example we can say this is a variable name, base underscore URL, and this is the value that assigned to this variable. So if our API address is something like that, HTTPS, this is the part, and this is our assume that this is our API endpoint URL. So here if you notice that the first part, the base, it is exactly the same, the value that we assign to a base underscore URL variable name. So we can, instead of writing this hard code, this API, we can easily write base underscore URL and then slash rest of the part of the API, which is the the API slash user slash 2, right? So this and this exactly the same thing. So only the difference that instead of using the all the way the API URL, we use our base URL, which is the variable name in our endpoint. So there is a reason why we need to use the variable, or the use case of variables, because assume that this you have endpoint, something like that. This endpoint, if you use in 10 different request, and some reason your base URL got changed, some of the part of your base URL got changed from IN, instead of IN it got changed as com. So what will happen, all the 10 requests that you use this base URL, this URL where you have to use this, this part, your base URL, each and every request you have to go and you have to change it manually, which is time consuming, and there is a chance to have a mistake. So instead of that, if we have declared this, we create this base URL in one certain place, and then we just call this, use this base URL wherever we need in our request. So we'll just go to the same, that specific place, and then we'll update up there the value of this base URL, and then so this, since we're using this variable to our each and every request instead of the whole URL, so if there is a change happen, this change will reflect each and every request, right? That's one of the use case of using the variables or benefits. Okay, so let's change it to IN over here. Okay, so this is just variable, right? So simply variable, it's a you can say name, it stores some value or assigns some value. So whenever we need to use this value, instead of using this value, we use the variable up there as a reference. And now let's come to environment. So what is environment? So environment is a sets of variables you can use in your Postman request. So if you're not clear over here, so environment it's in like in real life you will have a different type of, you may have a different type of environment. Let's go to our Postman. Okay, So in our Postman, you are already familiar with this our project, like demo API testing. So here in our Postman, you can see there is one option over here. It's called environment. So right now there is no environment. So none of our previous lecture, we didn't use any environment. So it's ran on, there is no specific environment, ran on the cloud environment. But in real life, what will happen? So this is your project. You have a number of requests over here, right? So all the requests, you may have to run in different environment. You could have a QA environment. You could have a UAT environment, user acceptance testing environment, right? You could have even the prod environment, so that you can run all the test cases in different environment to make sure that every time the code gets deployed to the different environment, it's working still fine. So that's why we have the Postman have an option over here to you can select your environment from over here after you set up your environment, and you can run all the same test cases. Okay, so let's see that how we can create an environment. So on the left side, you can see we have an option environment. So click on over here. We have one environment. It's called global environment. Global's environment is the default. This is a global environment. We'll come to a little bit later about a global environment. It is already created, but we can create our own environment. Here you can see there's a create environment. Click on up there, and then you can give a environment name over here. So you can give a name QA environment. Okay, and here when you give your name, here there is a few things over here. You have option to give a variable name and also the value. So that's why we talk about the variable first, because the variable have a link with the environment. When you create an environment, the reason why you create an environment, so that you have a specific variable with a specific data, so that when you run your test cases for this specific variable, you can reference that data, can use to that specific environment. Okay, so let's create a variable over here. Okay, so we'll create over here, say example, I will give a variable name over here, base underscore URL, and then here there's a type. It means the variable, there is two types. There is a default, one is default. If you click and drop down, there is another one is called secret. It is the variable can have in Postman two different type, default and secret. Default, it's by if you don't choose your type, it will be automatically default. So I will show you what is the difference. So let's put the value. So in a value, you have two different value. One is the initial value, another one is current value. So let's put the initial value first of all. For the same, since we have the same our URL would be in. Let me just copy this one. The base URL, I'm going to place the value for the base URL. This is the one, right? This is the one, our base URL. Okay, and then let's put the and after that, and your current value would be we'll keep the same. So but here is the difference between current value and the base value. The current value, it means like initial value, it means at the beginning when you place some value to up there. But if any reason later on, after maybe one month later, your this value for this variable could be changed. If its change happen, your change will come over here. So when we'll execute our request for this specific environment, and using this variable to our request, it will always get the value from the current value. It will always refer the current value, not the initial value. So in our case right now, it is both same, but in real life you may have that's why one of the reason why we have two different the value for the one variable. Initial value is the initial at the beginning, so and the current value is the latest or updated value. So always it will be get the value, this value will be assigned as a reference for you this variable. Okay, So now let's get back to about the variable type. So variable type, it is the default. So default is like you can see the value for this variable, but if you choose the secret, you see what's happened. As soon as you choose the secret, all of your value, it's in the post, according to Postman, it's called, they use a max on your value. So max, it means it's your value is covered, to secret, to hide the actual value. So to protect from the threats, to protect for the security reason. Okay, so you may have a very important the data, it's assigned to this variable, so you want to keep it secret, you want to hide it. That time you can use your variable type as a secret. Okay, so it's totally up to you which one you are going to use, but it has a both option. Okay, so that's our the value and variable, and this is the way you can create and assign the value. Now let's create another environment. Okay, so before you create, make sure you click on saved. You saved it. Okay, so let's create another environment. So you can create a new environment. Let's give a name over here. I will say prod. Okay, so it's like production, and then you can give the same base underscore URL, and then you'll give the in this case, now assume that we have another environment. It's like a prod, and it has a environment like hosting URL would be the different, right, than the QA. So assume that this is our our hosting environment. Both are same right now for now. Okay, so assume that this is the fake environment. We don't have any environment. I just giving you different to understand you, to explain you. That's why I just give it a fake address for the the prod environment. Just to save it now. Now let's get back to over here our collection. Now if I just wanna just let's go to the one of our example over here. Okay, this is our one of our request, get request. Okay, and so how we can apply our variable to our request. This is the main objective, so that we can use those variable to our request. So now let's go to do this, select what what environment you want to use. Say example the QA. Now over here where so this is exactly the same. So I mean, this was the URL. We create a base variable. We create a variable instead of this using this value, right? So to use this variable in your endpoint, in your API, you can just highlight that. You can see, you can set as variable. You can click there, and now it will show you that this is you have already, there is a variable created in this environment, right? In this environment, and you can see this is the value for this environment. I mean this variable, right? This is the two variables. So right now, and this is called, you can see this is scope. Scope means your environment. So this variable, it's been created in this environment with the environment name is QA, right? If you want, you can just select this one. So you can say automatically, it automatically change to your variable. And if you hover your mouse, you can see it will give you the also details. This is the variable name, and this is the value. So it will be concatenated. So this will be add to over here instead of this base URL, and then rest it will be like. Okay, so that's the way you can use your variable in your request. So you can use this variable over here. You can use this variable even in your body, even in your test script. In all different places you can use your variable. Okay, so where I mean the reason why people they create a variable, so that if you need to use the same data in multiple times, in different times, so that time instead of hard coding that value, you can just refer that variable. And also since if you use the same value in multiple times, so if the value got changed, so that you don't have to manually go each and every places and update the new value. Instead of, since you declared this variable in one place, it's a in one place, like in our case we declare this variable in one place, and then in our queue environment, if you need to change the value of that variable, we can just go to the queue environment and we can change up there, and every places we use this variable, it will be reflected. Okay, let's save it. Let's say that where else we use this variable. So we use this over here too. Let's update it. Just highlight over here. You can see over here, save it. Now let's see the create a new user. We use over here, highlight here, and set variable over here. Okay, so let's save it. So you can use every places wherever you need, right? So now let's go. I can call over here. Let's see, click on send. Let's test it. Here we go. You can see we got the response exactly the same. Like this endpoint, it's supposed to give us all the users in page 2, right? So we got the response exactly the same when we had this URL before, like the actual hardcore URL before. Instead of that, we use the reference, like we use the variable, so we're getting the same response, right? So if you go up there, now another one, let's try this one too. See, we got exactly the same, right? We got exactly the same response, right? There is no problem. So that's the use case of the variable and the benefits. So you can see, right? And then now, if you need to change the variable's value, as I said, you again go to your environment, right? Select your QA variable, right? Environment. Then if you come over here, so example, you need to change it, right? So you will change it. This is your current initial, and you will change that current one. So you were over here. If you need to change, you will change over here, and then you will save it, and then you will go back to your collection, and over here all of your collections in a request, you use this variable everywhere, it will be automatically reflect, because over here you are not changing anything. This is just the same variable you are using. So the value got changed to the behind the scene, it will reflect this variable, it will reflect the updated value. So this is the benefit of using the variable, right? When you have a multiple, and definitely when you have a multiple environment, or the same data you are using in multiple requests. Now let's say if I want to use now on over here the prod, what will happen? So let's use the prods, to change the environment. So click on send. Okay, we found an error. It says could not send the request. The request was not able to send. You get the errors, and the default time got out. The requested time got out. So you can see console. It said to see any error happen. So there is over here you can see there is a console. Click on there, and you can see the error. So it's saying this is our this is our request API. So over here this is the base URL, and this, if you remember that in our prod environment, we create a same variable base URL, the same variable, and the value was this. So this values got replaced, and then rest is API user 2. And over here, it is not a, as I said, this 192.168 is not a valid server. It is an invalid. Just to explain you, to show you, how we can use the variable in different environment with our environment. That's what I showed you. That's why I create this one. So you can see the details over here. You can see the details, right? It said like connection, the connect timeout to this. So and so this is not, since this is not a actual active host, the server, that's why it's giving me that kind of error. So let's change our environment to over here, okay, and close this one. So let's go back to our environment again. So now you know how you can create an environment. You can create as many as the environment you want, and also you can create a variable with the value. Here is a so this variables that you have seen, these variables we're using through different environment, right? So this is the scope. So this is the scope of this. So this variables use case is on their specific request for a specific collection. So scope of using these variables, it could be your environment level, it could be your collection level, it could be your global levels, and it could be there is a local data level, and also there is a local level. So how we can, so you can create like we create a variable in our environment level like QA, right? So you can similarly create a variable for global. So exactly the same thing, you can give base example base underscore URL, and then you can just place the value over here. So whatever it is, you can place. So let's remove it. Let's give our actual value. Okay. Let's give the real value for our API, and this is our card. So this is a globals, the scope. So where this variables we have created in global levels. So I will explain you what is the difference. Okay, then save it. So global levels, by the name you can understand globals. It means if you have any variable in your global, you can use this variable everywhere. You can use in any collection. So whatever the number of collection you have, in any collection, in any request, you can use in any environment you can use. So a lot of people, like the most use case, we use the variables in global level as well as environment level. So you have seen that so now we have the variables in global level. So we can use the same, if I just example, you can easily, if you want to remove, you can remove this the variable from your Q environment, and you can use this same variable from the globals. So if you have a globals, it means it will applicable, these variables will applicable to everywhere in your any environment, in any collections, any request inside the collections. If you have a variable in environment level like a QM prod, this will be specifically to use that. You have to change your environment. So when you change your environment, in this environment, whatever the collection you have, it will be able to use that. And also you have a scope to use your variables in collection level. So in collection, variables are suitable if you are using a single environment for example for the auth or URL details. So how we can create a variable in your collection level. So you can select whatever the collection you want to create a variable for that. Select that, and then this will come over here. You can see there is a variable tabs over here. So you can click on up there. Again, similarly, you can give a variable name and the initial value and the current value. So that time this variable only will able to use inside this collection. It means it will be applicable only for this collection. It means all of the the request you have inside this collection, it will be only applicable to those requested. Okay, you will not able to use refer this collection to other this variable to other collections. Okay, so this is the scope of using your variable to the collection level. Even you can create a variable for a specific request. So example over here, create over here. You can see. So for a specific request, you can create a variable. So variable again is nothing. What is the variable? Variable is the name, is a key, and there will be data that will be associated to this variable. For a specific request to use a variable which is called data driven. Data driven, like you are going to drive some data from external resource, some data to this specific request. To do this, you can see we have a full different lecture for the data driven testing. So but you can see just over here, example, for this request I wanna add some username and the value for actual data. Instead of over here, for this is like creating a new user, we can if you click on runner, and then here is an option, you can say run manual. Over here you can select over here how many times iteration. It will be iteration one time for each and every data. Delay, this is the you can put a delay for the each iteration. Over here select data, you can select file. So if you have a file, whether it's a JSON format file or you have a CSV file, you can pull the data using this file and come to over here and you can run it. So this data will automatically will retrieve and assign to this, apply to this specific request. So that's the so in the format to write the data in the CSV or JSON file, it is a key value. It's similarly like we use in our the environment. When you create our environment, right, the way we follow this over here, there will be variable name and there will be value. Exactly the same format we have to write following the JSON or JavaScript, to declare a key, and there will be value in those file. And when you have multiple sets of data, then you can you can call the data, you can import the data from any format, any file, and then apply to a specific request. So that's called it's the data driven. So we have a separate, please check our link below. I will add that link so that you can watch that tutorial how to do the data driven testing, which is the part of like declaring the the creating a variable for a request level. And there is also another variable, it's called the local variable. So local variables are temporary variables that are assessed in your request script. Local variables values are scoped to a single request or collection runs and are no longer available when run is complete. Local variables are suitable if you need a value to override all other variable scopes but don't want to value the persist once the execution has ended. Local variable, we barely use local variable that much, so don't worry for now. Local variable, so mostly this is the scope, the variable scope. So when what different places you can use variables. You have seen that you can use variables in global. So we can create a variable in global, and then we can use that variable anywhere, any collections, any request. We can create a variable in collections. So in a specific collection you can create a variable and you can use that variable to that specific collection. It means all the requests underneath that collection. You can create a variable environment. We have seen that we created two different environment, QA and prod, and you can use that that variable whenever you choose based according to that environment and the collection you run. And also data, it is data is like as I just explained you, the data is you create variables or number of variables and values for a specific request and follow the data driven testing, which is cover a separate tutorial. Okay, and the local, I just told you the local is not that much use. So overall the variable mostly we use in three different places, global, collection and environment. This is the most three different scopes that we use variables. Okay, so that's pretty much all about the variables and the environments. Okay, I hope that it is very, very important. So to build your infrastructure idea, how all the Postman different actions works, a collection works, all the request works. Because when you're going to work on project real life, there'll be tons of, you have probably hundreds of requests. So how you can very smartly you can use your variable dynamic. There will be concept of dynamic variables too, right? How you can use your variables to make it to have a more control on your scope, on your testing. It is the very smart idea that you have to know the use cases of variables and also the relation with the environment. Okay, so that's all for today. Please subscribe.